This is the new Pixel 7 Pro. It's far from the dramatic reinvention of last year's Pixel 6 line, which brought with it bold new design, the first Google-made chip, and brand new camera hardware for the first time in years. They were a mostly solid lineup, with quite a few rough edges that made them a little less impressive than what Samsung and Apple had to offer at the time, and if it weren't for their killer price tag, they would have been almost impossible to recommend. But this year, things are different. Google's managed to sand back some of the rough edges and tighten some screws to make a phone that can easily go toe-to-toe with the best that Apple and Samsung can offer. So, why don't we take a quick look at what the Google Pixel 7 Pro has to offer. The 7 Pro keeps the same general design language that was introduced by the 6 Pro. A big 6.7-inch display with curved edges and a tiny hole punch on the front, with aluminium sides and a glass back, featuring a big bar housing the 3 cameras. This time round, that bar is also metal instead of glass and blends into the side rails instead of feeling awkwardly stuck on. It's small changes like this and the dramatically reduced curve on the screen that make the 7 Pro a far nicer looking device, and one that's also much more pleasant to use. It doesn't really look like any other phone, and I'm glad Google has chosen to stick with this unique style instead of going back to the more boring designs of their past. This unique look also carries over to the software. Last year's Android 12 went in a whole new direction when it comes to design, introducing the Material You colour system that matches your apps with your wallpaper, a revamped notification shade, and a host of weird new widgets and animations. Android 12 was also a mess. It was buggy, and combined with the Pixel 6's poor thermal management, caused some big battery issues. Android 13, like the 7 Pro itself, makes the whole experience smoother. The bugs are gone, animations are smoother, and Material You got even more colourful. It also added a fun new media player. Just look at that squiggle. Last year brought the introduction of Google's Tensor chip, their first processor designed in-house, and it was meant to herald the arrival of a smarter smartphone. The best parts of prior Pixels were always their AI-powered features that often felt like magic. Cool screen, night sight, and super res zoom all made so-so hardware do things that more expensive phones couldn't, so the promise of a chip built specifically to handle tasks like this sounded great. The reality of Tensor was a little less impressive than many had hoped. Yes, those AI-powered features continue to be great, as was the newly introduced Magic Eraser, but battery life, thermals, and performance weren't up to scratch. Last year's phones also dropped signal more than any other device I've ever used due to their poor modem, and for many months people just didn't get signal. The Pixel 7's Tensor G2 changes that. Performance, battery, thermals, and connectivity are finally up to scratch and worthy of the flagship name Google gives the Pixel 7 Pro. Tensor G2 also allows for new features like photo unblur. The name is pretty self-explanatory. You can take any photo from your library, hit a button, and your photo is magically unblurred. This is pretty impressive and particularly useful for older photos, but it's not as immediately cool as last year's Magic Eraser, which continues to be an awesome tool to have in your pocket. Speaking of photos, let's get onto the part of the Pixel that's always impressed the most. Once again, the 7 Pro is a device made up of small refinements to make dramatic improvements, and nowhere is that more clearly demonstrated than in the camera. Like most flagship phones, it's got a triple camera system on the back and a fairly standard selfie shooter on the front. The main 50 megapixel wide lens is the same as on the Pixel 7 and last year's Pixel 6, but the other two have seen some big changes. That ultra-wide is considerably wider than on last year's phones and features a new macro mode to help you get detailed shots of close-up objects. And for things that are further afield, the new 5x telephoto can get you even more detailed shots at a longer distance. Take a look at this photo. While it might not look great at first, it becomes far more impressive when you see how far away I was when I took it. Like the iPhone 14 Pro, the Pixel uses a new cropping technique on both its 1 and 5x cameras to give 2 and 10x shots that should come out at the same sort of quality as a photo from a dedicated lens. Like always, the Pixel camera is packed with software features that you just can't get anywhere else. Night sight continues to be my favourite implementation of a night mode on any phone, and it's gotten even faster on the Pixel 7. The Pixel's astrophotography mode that's existed since 2019 is a standout that no one else has yet to reproduce. Being able to take such detailed shots of the stars in the space of just a few minutes with no extra hardware or a confusing pro mode is incredible, and the motion modes allow for cool shots like these. So this is a look at video on the Pixel 7 Pro. It's always been an area that Android phones have struggled in, and they've never been able to keep up with iPhones like this one, which I've used to record the rest of the video. It looks pretty good, but it's not as great as it could be. Stabilization is great as always on the Pixels, but these new zoom lenses have one big issue. The transitions are super rough. As you can see, when I go into 5x, it takes a couple seconds to adjust. Once you're there, it looks pretty great. But the movement between the two, it's not good. This is the Pixel 7's new cinematic video mode, which I think is pretty disappointing, because it limits your video to 1080p, and it's not very good at separating the foreground from the background. So that's the Pixel 7 Pro. It's the first Pixel phone that I can finally recommend over an iPhone or Samsung flagship. Google's finally managed to make a device with all the wonderful Pixel exclusive features that isn't brought down by some fatal flaw. Performance, battery life and thermals are all up to snuff, and the camera brings a consistent quality and a zoom range that can only be found on the most expensive of Samsung phones. Combine these solid fundamentals with all the excellent extras that buying a Google phone gets you, like call screening and the now playing indicator, and you get one of the best Android phones around. And at $849, the Pixel severely undercuts the newly price-hyped iPhone 14 Pro and the S22 Ultra, while delivering a comparable experience in a much more fun and exciting package. So that's that for my Pixel 7 Pro review. It was my first properly scripted and edited video. Hopefully it was alright. Make sure you subscribe and stick around for more.